Hello, everybody out there in radio land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org, only here on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. As always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 WIDR or Western Michigan University, no matter how dope or insightful they may turn out to be. So, again, first time listener, this is the weekly program here on at the station where they let me come and give you some cutting analysis about what is going on here in Kalamazoo, the state of Michigan, the so-called United States, and the rest of the world from a working class perspective, generally calling out the establishment on its BS, and as the name says, kind of digging up underneath the headlines and talking about what either the mainstream corporate media isn't talking about or in exposing capitalist propaganda, all of that good stuff. So I start off today by saying, hey, it's a voting day. Today is the primary. Whether you're voting for the Democrats or the Republicans or whatnot, you get to choose. Uh, Ostensibly, the voters get to choose today who will be representing them in November's election. As we talked about last week, here in District 4, we don't really, we had a race, we no longer have a race. It's Jessica Schwartz is running uncontested. However, there is a very important race going on today at the state level between Hill Harper and Alyssa Slotkin. If you want to hear me and Lawrence talk about that. That is last week's episode. You can find that online on our podcast links or on YouTube. If you're not sure who to vote for or anything, maybe that'll help you figure some stuff out. So yeah, don't forget to vote. It's election day. Hey, this kind of stuff is very important. And it looks like we will be joined today by my co-host, which is good because I originally thought they weren't going to be able to make it because of work. But let's see here. That's maybe. Um, so we might be joined by my co-host in just a second here. Um, but yeah, again, so it's a voting day, it's election day. Shout out to folks right outside the studio if you got any questions if you're voting here or you want to. And Also, we're going to be digging into a lot of different issues today. Again, we've got some statewide stories that we're going to be talking about here in just a second. We're also going to be hitting on some critical stuff going. I mean, some of you may have heard the big news. Kamala Harris picked their VP, and we're going to be talking about that. And looks like I am being joined now by my co-host Lawrence. Lawrence, as soon as you get on the line, how are you doing today?
I'm on my lunch break, but other than that, I'm good.
Okay, give me actually just a sec. I gotta plug you in. I forgot to do that. All right.
So
Sorry.
what you want to talk about, bro?
Okay, so well, while we have you on your break, so caveat, we were gonna record some ahead of time yesterday. I've been having a really long week. Had to deal with some family health emergencies over the weekend, but I am glad that you're able to cut some time out of your schedule to hop on the show. So, I mean, I usually going to start with local stuff, but you might have a little bit more limited time than me, Lawrence. So, what would you like to hit on first?
First of all, I mean, we're going to talk about some local stuff. Hill Harper, folks, Hill Harper, go vote for him today. You should. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I know that as a political pundit and commentator, I shouldn't tell you who to go vote for because that's not what you're supposed to do, right? In news media. But this is our show, and I don't care. Go vote for Hill Harper.
I'm
Go vote
gonna
for Hill
say,
Harper.
can't do Paul's tag. You can vote for Hill if you would
Yeah,
like to vote for a candidate who is not a former CIA agent. That is an
yeah.
option.
If
Um,
if you would like to not vote
yeah,
for an op,
yeah. We're just laying out the
like
options, folks. They just
yeah,
tell you what you can. Yeah.
do
uh,
do what you're gonna do and
mhm.
live in color. But
Yeah. Hmm.
but if the Senate races today, primaries is today, and primaries are the most important thing. I know that it's a very rainy and stormy day in Michigan,
It
especially in
is.
our area in Michigan. It's been thunderstorming like crazy. I plan on going to go vote later
Mhm.
today. But yeah, if I was to go vote for somebody for Senate, I would vote for Hill Harper.
Yeah. Hmm.
That's just
That's
that's my personal opinion. I'm gonna stick to it. Yeah.
all right. Well, yep. So again, food for thought, everybody out there listening, and yeah, it is important to go out there and again, if you don't participate in elections, the ruling class just makes selections, and I mean they do that a lot anyway. But
Yeah.
um,
If you don't participate, you are advocating, um you are you are just, acquiescing to your subjugation.
yep. And as I mentioned last time too, some of these can prove important. I think we're seeing today is a good example of how even um, the leverage of like the power of even the candidate that doesn't win can sometimes be expressed somewhere down the line in ways you can't really predict. So even if Hill Harbor doesn't win, if they get a sizable turnout, that could, you can maybe pressure Alyssa Slotkin later on. I'm kind of referring to also the Democratic Party making an interesting decision today. I don't know if we want to jump right into that though. Up to you, Lawrence. That was the big breaking news of today, of course, but
So that news was real. I thought that was a
mhm.
joke.
Yeah, no, it's real. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, so Kamala Harris picked her running mate today, and it's going to be someone that a lot of us weren't really expecting because we've been doing this show for about 8 years now, and I think it's made us. I mean, we're very realistic, somewhat cynical, and I was in a state of disbelief when my fiance told me the news this morning. 'Cause it's like, are you telling me the Democrats made two like good decisions like twice in a row? I couldn't believe it because the script for how this usually goes, and especially if you're a younger listener and you haven't seen this before, is Democratic Party, they'll do something. Okay, so that was kind of smart. Joe Biden's going to drop out. Kamala's going to step up. The next thing I would expect them is to pick somebody like Josh Shapiro or somebody hedging far to the right that is going to enrage the progressive base. And basically, I was waiting for the Democratic Party to fumble the bag. Um, and by selecting Tim Walz, they actually did something that, if you listen to like a lot of progressive pundits, they've been talking about how this would be a really good pick, a strategic pick. Tim Walz is one of the most high-profile progressive politicians in the country. He's really made a lot of waves in Minnesota, gotten a lot of things done. Um,
We spoke
is
about his record last show. It
mhm.
universal free college for people who make less than $80,000 a year. Expanded healthcare. Put in gun reform. Uh, just a number of policies. Made sure that students would have food. Hungry kids programs. Got more funding for school funding. Expanded abortion rights. Like the dude is the progressive that gets things done in real life. And the fact that the Democratic Party was like, yeah, we're gonna go with him. Because like we thought it was gonna be Shapiro, or we thought it was gonna be Buttigieg, like, or worst case scenario, it was gonna be Hillary Clinton. But
Mhm.
no,
and
Tim
and
Walz.
keep in mind, as recently as 4 years ago, and then the 4 years before that, that was the MO of the Democratic Party. Hillary Clinton in 2016, there was a very high profile rift between kind of the corporate neoliberal branch of the Democratic Party, this insurgent progressive one by Bernie Sanders, and basically swatted a newspaper at them by picking Tim Kaine, who was another neoliberal centrist.
I mean,
Um,
Barack Obama picked Joe Biden, a much more conservative Democrat. Like
Mhm.
the precedent of picking someone who's to the right of you as a Democrat is normally how the MO goes.
Yeah. Even in 2020, you should remember that in the context of that primary, where you had Bernie almost clinched that until Obama made a couple of phone calls in South Carolina and all that stuff. And Joe Biden very deliberately picked, Kamala Harris, who uh again is certainly to the right of Bernie Sanders, but also is kind of probably was seen as like the most viable of like that new school of centrists that cropped up in that particular presidential primary. So Joe Biden was
Yeah,
not
she
going
pretended
to
she
his left.
pretended to be progressive for like 30 seconds.
Yeah, and again, this is something that we're talking about now that they're the presidential nominee. But we've talked a little bit about the record as prosecutor, but we're just trying to paint a picture that this is very novel. It is very new. They usually do not pull somebody from the populist progressive wing of the party to shore up the ticket. They have been resistant to doing that for not just 4 or 8 years, but let's be clear, since like Jimmy Carter, really, everything that the Democrats have done since the 80s has been trying to shore up or peel voters from the Republican base or the quote unquote center. And it's the first time really in my lifetime I have seen the party kind of triangulate around how do we actually go into this upcoming election with the broadest coalition we can. And from that calculus, they would pick somebody like Tim Walz. And it's important to understand, like, this wasn't just, you know, you had people like Nancy Pelosi pushing for this, as well as, again, this was the person Bernie Sanders endorsed for the selection. So, it again, it is a new day in American politics. Now, like, let's also be clear, put my Marxist hat on for a little bit. This is what is this the result of? It is the result of incredible public pressure from the base. Is it also maybe an understanding of the stakes? We've talked a lot about the show, like, a lot of Democrats, the corporate Democrats, cynically fundraise off of the threat that Trump represents. But there also does seem to be a lot of like clarity from some people in the party that, like, yeah, actually this does represent like a very intense escalation in the sort of kind of fascism that we see in America. So I guess there's a lot of
I
speculation
have
about this thing,
theories.
but
I
mhm,
have theories.
mhm,
My very cynical theory is that the Democrats know that they're going to be protested at the DNC, mostly because of their policy of Gaza. And also, we've seen the Biden administration do 10 to 15% of their actual agenda, right? So canceling student loan debt, lowering prescription medical costs for only like 10 drugs, right? Uh, they did like the Chips and Science Act and all those things, right? They've done things that helps along the edges, but it's not the fundamental change that the base wants. It's not universal free college tuition. It's not universal basic healthcare. It's not even a public option or universal basic income. Um, and also, Kamala was supposed to be on the border, and they took a right wing approach that pissed off their base, right? With the
mhm.
executive actions that were literally Republican ideas. So this is an olive branch to the base to be like, please get off my, please get off my tail, please, please, just just until we can get this fascist to no longer want power. Get off my tail. I will pick somebody that's to the left of me. And also, he has the aesthetics of being an old white guy. So the I'm not racist, but you know what I'm saying, people can be like, I'll vote for her because she got the old white guy. So he is a
Yeah, yeah.
DEI hire, even though they try to say that about her. but
Yeah,
it is
it's
true.
I think it's the way the pundit class might describe. He has a folksy authenticity,
Oh,
which is
have
to
you
say,
seen his
like,
interviews? Have you seen his interviews? The man, that's the other thing. The man is excellent when it comes to talking about democratic values, and also the way he speaks. He could bring in independents and Republicans because of how of his populist message. It is a fantastic strategy pick, and I have to give it to Kamala Harris and her base. Like, I don't know who's on her team, but whoever said, "Hey, yo, you need him," needs to get a raise.
yeah, because I just just about a week ago, a lot of us were expecting Josh Shapiro, and the alternate reality version of our program today would be us just talking about like, man, they really fumbled the bag. This is a guy who wanted Ben and Jerry's banned from the state, who compared Gaza solidarity protesters to the Klan, and typically that would be where they would go. They would pick somebody really corporate, centrist, far right, really like as friendly to APAC as possible. And that would be the person that was like, you're just gonna have to suck it up, sweetie. Otherwise, Trump's gonna win. Which would have been a disaster, of course.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Or
again,
they could have,
tip of the
or
hat
they
to
could have
whoever.
went, or they could have went with the worst pick and picked Buttigieg or Clinton. like
Oh,
those have been
yeah,
the even
right,
worse. Those would have been
yeah,
like worst case scenario picks. Like, oh God, what are you
mhm,
thinking?
yeah.
But yeah, I'm like I said today. Biden dropped out. Kamala is breaking finance records. The Republicans can't are basically saying that she slept her way to the top. That they have done everything in their power to show the American people that they're not like us. To quote Kendrick Lamar,
Mhm.
and they haven't been able to find a successful attack on her. And she just picked the best candidate that her base would want.
Yep. Hmm.
I, the only dog Kamala wasn't my first choice on who I wanted. I actually we both wanted to open primary, but if she comes out now and says, "Hey, yo, we're not giving another dollar to Israel until they actually come to the table and do a ceasefire," I will canvass for her. I will knock doors for her if she does that.
Yeah, I think that's probably, and especially going into the convention, which is about 2 weeks away, that is going to be the single biggest open question about like how much does this represent an actual turn on our approach to the genocide in Gaza? Because that is an important issue for young people. That's an important issue for many, many Michiganders. Again, going back
She's not
to
going to win Michigan without it. She's
yeah.
not winning Michigan without a severe heel turn on that topic.
And the voters who care about that issue, we are savvy enough to understand the distance between just, rhetorically condemning Israel and actually taking actions on it. You have to cut you got to cut that pipeline of weapons and money and all that stuff that is flowing directly into the IDF that makes this genocide possible. Voters are smart enough. Those voters are smart enough to understand that you can't just say, "Hey, they're going too far." They're doing, and but while at the same time sending planes and guns and bombs over there, you can't do that. So,
Yeah.
we'll see.
Did you hear about the quick transition? Because this is a quick hit. Because I can only be on here until 11:45. Did you hear about the strike that Israel just did in recently?
Uh,
Not what they did against Iran or in assassinating a Hezbollah person
mhm,
in in another country. So starting a war in with another country.
yeah.
I'm talking about they just killed at least 30 people sheltering in a Gaza school.
Oh Lord. We actually have a
Yeah,
story about that I'm going to get into later. But yeah, that just to hit real quick on that, Netanyahu is kind of flailing about he's hoping Trump wins. I mean, granted, Kamala has a bad track record on this too, but like, Trump will give him a more outsized license to kill than an incoming
yeah,
Democratic administration would, just objectively. And I understand those on the left. We understand both parties are kind of in the tank for Israel, but one is worse than the other. Um, and yeah,
yeah.
this
No,
is like
yeah.
Netanyahu is really
There's.
he's trying to start this you see this time and time again when an unpopular leader is watching their approval ratings tank. The best thing to do is start a war, and that's largely what Netanyahu's trying to do right now by doing these very abrasive and aggressive things, bombing somebody on Iranian soil, etc. He's trying to draw us in
Yeah,
particular to this conflict. You might have seen stories about this, about us moving troop movements, U.S. troop movements going into the Gulf and stuff. So yeah,
yeah. So just a quick hit because normally when we do this, I just want to give a small trigger warning to everybody who's about to hear me describe this. This is coming from the New York Times. Uh, an Israeli airstrike uh on several on schools functioning as shelters in Gaza City killed at least 30 people and injured dozens more on Sunday, according to the Palestinian Emergency Response Agency in Gaza and Palestinian news outlets. It is the third attack on schools in the last 4 days. I want to understand we were always told that you should steel man someone's argument so that you're not doing straw mans and arguing something that they're not suggesting. I just want to know. This is the third school that they have attacked in 4 days, and they've killed 30 people. Let's say they killed a Hamas terrorist. One. Let's say they killed 10. 10 out of that 30. They've bombed three schools in the last 4 days. The other civilians that died in that airstrike, what did they have to do with October 7th? What did they have to do with the terrorist attack that happened that 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 created this kind of response? If you say that they're all terrorists or there's no uh civilian is Palestinian, or if you're saying that, hey man, we had to bomb the school to get the terrorists, you're an idiot. I'm just letting you know you're an idiot. They they hit a Hezbollah commander in, what was it, Iran, in in another country, and they did a precise strike that had minimal casualties. So it's not that Israel can't do it; they're choosing not to do it in Gaza.
you
They're,
know, I think it really does speak to, and there's some great articles and resources. There's a really good documentary from the Empire Files that really talks about this, but the way that
yeah, shout out to Adam
the
Martin.
the far right capture of the Israeli government and even like the cultural shift really presaged a lot of the sort of Trumpist politics that we've seen over the last decade, because you've really seen just this really like far right, overtly genocidal wing of Zionism come to power in Israel over the last 10 years or so. I'm going to be referring to an article about that later on too. But, um, you have people like, this made some headlines. Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, he said this last Monday, but two quotes said, blocking humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip is justified and moral, even if it causes 2 million civilians to die, but the international community won't let it happen. So what he's basically saying is the rest of the world is wrong. We're morally justified in this genocide. for X, Y, and Z reasons. And this is a way that a lot of people in the Israeli government and a substantial chunk of the population really think. Um, and it's a lot of I think like a glass half full way to look at this is you saw a lot of this same sort of institutional cultural rot towards the last days of apartheid South Africa, and they were also making a lot of these provocative warmongering moves to their neighbors, trying to invade Zimbabwe, et cetera, et cetera. So there's some parallels you can draw between them and other colonial projects in a state of decay. And we are really seeing like the last days of Israel being able to, trying to present this moderate mask to the rest of the world. That has thoroughly slipped off. I mean, the fact that we're openly talking about a presidential candidate who is openly criticizing what Israel and IDF is doing. If you look at, we've been doing the show for 8 years. If you look at us doing these stories 2, 4, 6 years ago, and I especially need my younger listeners to understand this, who might despair that we haven't gotten further than we have. The level of scrutiny and criticism on the U.S. government supporting Israel is higher than I have ever seen it in my life. And we need to keep pushing
Fact.
it, especially when we have people like this finance minister in positions of power in Israel who again feel like genocide on their part is totally morally justified.
Oh man. Yeah. But we could keep going on, but yeah, you pretty much said everything I was gonna say. Like there's there's no justification for what Israel is doing at this particular time that would satisfy anyone's definition of justification. There's just none. There's no what is what, defending yourself after you get hit or after you're attacked is perfectly fine. You then slaughtering everyone in a city in a city block that's no bigger than Detroit, you displacing a number of people that's twice the size of Detroit,
Yeah.
then no, that's not
Mhm.
justified.
It's kind of the same thing around like the general public is people are generally genuinely support justice or revenge or whatever you want to call it. Like look at I think a good comparison is you ask the average American how they feel about the Iraq and Afghanistan war. People from both sides of the political spectrum, most of them are going to say like, "What a boondoggle! What a waste of time!" It was obviously about like oil or profit motive, etc. Even most like far right or libertarian people will agree with that. Now you ask about the assassination of Osama bin Laden, and most people are gonna be like, "Yeah, that was actually a pretty decent thing," So would Israel be in a better place politically, geopolitically right now if they had just SEAL Team Six, a few of the people who did October 7th? Unquestionably, but they wanted to use it as a pretext to liquidate Gaza, and because of that colonial overreach, they're in a place now where they have become a pariah to even many of their former allies.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. There's nothing much more I want to add to that. Pretty much, that's pretty much it.
Yep.
Now, I do have a quick hit. So let's just quick hit, because the Olympics is going on. America is doing wonderful, fantastic things in the Olympics. Shout out to Simone Biles, being the most decorated gymnast to ever do it. Um, I keep messing up this woman's name. She's the most decorated female Olympian in the world. Uh, in swimming, I can't think of her name. I keep messing it up. Uh, it's Kate. I think it's Kate something. Um, yeah, Katie Lee Ledecky.
Hmm.
She's basically she's the from what I understand, all of the records when it comes to women swimming, she's broken. She's set all of them. she she is she is her. Like when it comes to um you had a fantastic thing when I saw yesterday in track and field where the I think it was shot putter. America became the first to ever get first and silver and gold. They're the first American women to ever get silver and gold in the sport. Uh, the female rugby team was the first ever rugby team to get bronze. Like America's been doing good. The
Hmm.
reason why I keep bringing up these women is because there's been a giant controversy about
Oh yes, we gotta talk about
conservatives.
this. Oof.
Yeah, yeah, we're gonna talk
Yeah,
about it. Uh, Conservatives and weirdos are doing the thing that makes them weird, and that is calling women trans because insert reason here. They we're both old enough to remember when Sierra, the singer, had to go on 106 in Park because people were saying that about her when she first came out.
hmm,
And she had to be like, dog, I'm a regular woman. I don't know what to tell y'all. They did the same thing to Michelle Obama. They did the same thing to the Williams sisters. They said the same thing about Katie LeDunk and Simone Biles, and they said it about this boxer, this female boxer who beat her opponent in 46 seconds. She's not even an American boxer. And they said it about her. I want to bring this up because one, using the fear of trans people to discredit cis women is sick and disgusting
absolutely. Yeah,
because because look, they don't like you, they don't know you, and you calling them trans is not going to get their attention. You're just being a weirdo. But secondly, the last 20 years, the Olympics has let transgender athletes enter the Olympics and play in sports that that co-sign with their gender identity. None of them in the last 20 years have dominated the sport that they're in. As of right now, there's a trans man, a person that was assigned female at birth, transitioned, and is now boxing in the male division. No one's talking about that. And that's happening in this Olympics. But we've heard all the stories about this Middle Eastern woman beating up an Italian woman in 46 seconds, and she's just a regular woman. Now, she may have from what some are saying or speculating that she has XX chromosomes, so she's intersexed in that way, but she was born with all of the parts of a female. She just produces more testosterone. And the Olympics has singled out athletes who do this as usually black athletes. I'm thinking about the South African woman that was the Olympian that was in track and field, and they made her take puberty blockers. They made her take um because her body produced too much testosterone. They made her take medicine to lower that, and it ruined her body. It ruined her chances in the Olympics. And some athletes, when it comes to just being athletes, are going to be able to produce more testosterone. They're going to be able to produce more things to make them a better athlete. That does not make them trans.
I also did want to
They're
point.
just built different. They're
Yeah,
just built better.
I did want to point out the evidence that a lot of these weirdo transphobes are touting comes from the International Boxing Association. And there's a little bit of geopolitical intrigue around that because the IBA president at the time was Russian, and that decision was made right after Khalif had defeated a Russian boxer. We understand, if you understand like Russian politics, there's a lot of this kind of nascent corruption going on. So they look for a reason to disqualify them after the fact. Uh, WAPO, Washington Post, did say that there never has been evidence that Khalif had XY chromosomes, and even the elevated testosterone levels. But the IBA did not reveal the testing methodology, saying the specifics remain confidential. So there's a little bit of geopolitical intrigue around that. But I wanted to just zero in on kind of just there's this perfect storm of transphobic bigotry, racism, colonial stuff that is going on here, and is again that has really been weaponized against Amani Khalif. And you know, it, I think on one hand, so I had a friend who commented this, maybe in a weird way, this is a good thing because it is really exposing just how stupid and insane a lot of these transphobes are to the rest of the world. People like J.K. Rowling, Elon Musk, etc., coming out and just without a shred of real evidence calling this person a man. It shows the rest of the world that like these transvestigators and stuff. It again, as you mentioned, they're weird. These people are weird. Why do they care so much about what is in somebody's pants? And especially a boxer like Amani who's got like again, doesn't have a particular a genetic advantage over other boxers. She loses as much as she wins. She lost recently
Wait,
to
wait,
a
wait, wait,
pair of
wait.
Irish boxers.
Wait. She lost the last World Games, and her record out of her 45 fights, she lost 9 of them. She's only had 6 by knockout. If if we're going by their logic that this person was a man, I want to, or this person was assigned male at birth, do you think she would have more or less knockouts? Do you think if because men are technically stronger than women, right? And they're doing a combat sport, right? Do you think that she would knock out more women or do you think she would have had a more of a winning record if this person was who they said they were? The DL Hughley put it best, and I'm gonna paraphrase. He said the worst place for black people to be is in white people's imagination. I'm going to expand upon that.
Yeah.
The worst place for minorities to be, and this is all minorities, is in the thoughts of conservative white people. Because it's only conservative weirdos that do this. They do it with every minority. They fearmonger about a specific point so that we will then not seek or want to expand the circle of liberty so that all of human beings can enjoy the same rights as everybody else. That's what we're dealing with. Like they had
Mhm.
to invent a trans person to be angry at because there isn't a trans woman in the Olympic world that they can actually be angry at.
Yeah, exactly. And so Amani, to her credit, she did kind of finally break the silence and and I, good power to her. She's like, I need the support of all the people of Algeria because to paraphrase, she basically said, I am going to sue everybody. I'm going to sue all of these clowns that were,
All of
slandering me in
you
the
are going to
media.
get this work. And you know what? I'm
Yes.
here for it. I am
Yeah.
absolutely here for it.
Yeah.
Get your bag, Nami. Get
Yeah.
your bag.
hmm But I would also say too, like, talk to your trans friends. It does not feel good to be in a situation where it's like who you are as a person is being used just as a cudgel for, these despicable, bigoted, racist people like J.K. Rowling and Elon Musk. Who, by the way, there's this great tweet. It's like J.K. Rowling is like one bottle of alcohol away from saying that only white people can be women, but um, you know,
Fact.
um, but yeah, keep in mind, it's like again, this is just used as a de facto insult, and again, centering it's like there's nothing wrong with being trans, period. And the way that the right wing has just they've really gotten to this point where like this the existence of trans people is such this weird existential threat to them that they're just using it as like a conspiracy insult. Um, in a somewhat related story, Kyle Rittenhouse got on the bad side of the MAGA movement recently by not pledging
I did
fealty
see
to
that.
Donald Trump. And one of the first things they did, this became really widespread on Twitter, they started transvestigating Kyle Rittenhouse. There's all these conspiracies claiming that he was actually born a woman. Um, so
Here's
yeah,
the thing. Here's the thing. This is my last point on this is
mhm,
that it's disgusting when you're using the fear mongering of trans people to hurt cis women. Also, I also believe that if we're going to have trans people in sports, that yes, there should be some testing done. There should be you should go through the same testing and everything else that everybody else has to go through, right?
yeah, and I
But
think
then
like
if they and then if
yeah,
but then if they pass all the tests that everybody else have to go through, let them play because
mhm,
sports is supposed to be about a meritocracy. The best people are supposed to be able to rise to the top. And if you honestly believe that any guy off the street can just be like, "Hey, I'm a woman now," and get into the boxing ring with some of these women, they're going to knock you out.
yeah.
They're
Okay, that's also like a
like
really
like
sexist presumption to begin with. It's just like, oh, men are
like
just innately better. Like I'm not going to go in the ring with Amani Khalif. I'm gonna that's
yeah,
just
no, Doug, I saw her
gotta
other
find
fights
one
where she
spot.
knocked a woman out.
Yeah, yeah,
No,
yeah,
no, fam.
yeah.
like,
But I'm not
like,
gonna get in the
yeah,
ring with any of those women boxers. I'm gonna,
like
oh god,
Layla,
yeah,
Layla Ali
yeah,
is one of the world's most decorated female boxers of all time. She's arguably the GOAT when it comes to female
mhm,
boxing. You honestly believe any man can just walk into a ring with Layla Ali and win? Like, what
mhm,
is wrong with y'all? Y'all
yeah,
like that's like saying, hey man, guys are just better at sports. I'm gonna just go on the court with Serena and Venus Williams. Like, no, like,
yeah.
nah, fam. That's not how it works around here.
It's like there are actual conversations, and I've actually it's interesting. I've seen some sports people actually get in this. It's just like, maybe it'd be more productive to just like have sports divide kind of like the way that you do in boxing, just you have weight divisions and skill divisions and stuff. But like, again, the people who are doing all this transvestigating and scaremongering, they don't want a solution. They just
Yeah.
want to use trans people as a cudgel and to again oppress that marginalized group and scapegoat them for a lot of these nascent cultural and social problems that we're dealing with. So yeah,
Oh,
and
before we
yeah.
go, just quick hit. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry to interrupt. Just
Oh,
quick
go
hit.
ahead. Yeah, I was basically at
You,
the end of that
yeah. I'm so
conversation.
sorry.
Yeah.
Did you see how Donald Trump is now backpedaling, not wanting to debate Kamala Harris anymore? The boy's running scared. Mr.
Yeah.
Anytime, any place is running scared. So, so the only reason why I bring it up is because we might have some conservative viewers, and I just want to ask y'all: this is your king? That's your king? They got he. Remember how he was complaining all before the debate with Biden, talking about how it was rigged and all that stuff, and complaining about how it was unfair and all that jazz. And then he's like, "Nah, I'll debate him anytime, anywhere, and it might be rigged." Now, since he's going up against Kamala, and Kamala, honestly, if I'm going by her last debates, she doesn't debate well. Like if I'm being honest and objective about the work she did last time in a debate, she doesn't debate well.
Yeah,
And she
she
did
ran
she did
up some.
okay.
Yeah, she ran up some points against Joe Biden, if we remember those primary
Yeah.
debates. But yeah, generally though, not especially when people started bringing up her record, she really didn't know how to respond to that.
She had a good debate against what's his name? Mike Pence. She had a
Yeah,
good debate against Mike Pence.
hmm
But I'm going back 2 years ago when she had a conversation with Charlemagne the God on her own show, and Charlemagne asked her why are they letting Joe Manchin and Kristen Cinema tank their policies, and she folded. She folded badly. So I hope now that she's gotten better. I hope that prosecutor Kamala is back. Like, you know what I'm saying?
yeah,
I hope she brings back that energy because we're gonna need it. But at the same time, I'm like to see him run scale is hilarious. And yeah, Kyle Rittenhouse. Kyle, when you went online and said that you don't take anything back, that you're voting for Ron Paul, not Rand Paul, but for Ron Paul, his father, because of gun rights. And then after MAGA told you to go take a long walk off a short bridge, you folded, you kowtowed, you bent a knee, you cried and begged for forgiveness. You already showed that you were a coward once. And now you're continuing to show that you're a coward again. I need you to go take several seats next to Jesus and go sit next to Jesus and be quiet. Go do something else with your life. Work at Walmart. Be a Walmart greeter. Actually, no, you don't need to work in Walmart. I don't trust you around people. You need to work in telemarketing. That's what you need to do for the rest
Yeah.
of your life. Be on the phone so people can hang up the phone on you because you don't need to be in the public eye.
Maybe now that they've realized how disposable he is to the far right, maybe he'll have like a come to Jesus moment to leftists. Who knows? But I mean, as of right now, like,
I no, he can't come over here. He's just like
yeah,
Candace. He's just like
yeah,
Candace Owens. They cannot come over here. They need to stay
yeah.
where they're at on the other side of town,
Do
far away.
some spend the rest of his life doing some volunteer service or something. But like he's been marginalized out of living a normal life. He's been marginalized now by these people who, again, oh no, the cheetahs eat my face party, ate my face,
Yeah,
and I mean honestly, like kid, Pillsbury murder boy, that's what you get. I'm sorry. You
God,
should have stayed home a couple years ago. That's all I'm gonna
yeah,
say.
yeah.
Yeah.
You chose to go to a Black Lives Matters rally and then shoot three people because you felt that you can intimidate them with your weapon, and you got away with it. You got away with it. And then you continue to get away with it because Turning Point USA and others propped you up as a hero when you're not. So, it is what it is, man. You won. Take your victory lap and go home. But the more you stay in the public eye, the more you're only going to remind everybody how pathetic of a human being you are.
100%. Yeah.
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 Okay, I gotta go because I gotta get back to work. I'll
All
let you,
right.
man.
Lawrence, thanks for taking time out of your day to come and join us. We got a lot more of the show left. We will be right back. We're going to take a quick little break. Come back. Got some Michigan stories to get into. Y'all listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us on YouTube. Please check us out also at the Media Cyphers podcast. You can find that on most podcasting apps. Keep it dialogue. We'll be right back. This is Media Ciphers, your source for political revolution. Hello again, everybody out there in Radio Land. Y'all are listening to Media Ciphers only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. So we're just back. We just spent a good chunk of time talking about again the big announcement. Tim Walz is going to be Kamala Harris as running mate. Reminder, it is election day, and I think towards the end of the show, we're going to be playing back some coverage we did last week. So you can make the most well-informed decision possible before you go Pokemon go to the polls later. Sorry. That's an old joke for some of you young Gen Z, Gen Alpha kids out there. Um, uh, Probably the ultimate manifestation of pandering in politics. Anyway, um, wanted to switch gears now. We're going to talk a little bit about a social justice story from the east side of the state. Um, and again, this is a recurrent theme in a lot of our shows is the intersection of race, police brutality, and mental health. So this story comes to us from Left Voice. Headline is Activists and community members hold public hearing for the police murder of John Zook Jr. in Michigan. This is published on August 3rd. It's written by Emma Boitari. On Wednesday, July 10th, in Westland, Michigan, several organizations, along with family and community members, organized and attended a public hearing about a young black man, John Zook Jr., who was killed by police on June 18th after he called emergency services on himself in the midst of a mental health crisis. The event, organized and sponsored by several groups, including Survivors Speak, Black Coffee, Detroit Will Breathe, Washington County General Defense Committee, and others, began with speeches by family members. Attendees heard from John's sister, his brothers, and his father. John's brothers were the first to arrive at the scene of the shooting. As one of his brothers described, on the way there, I thought he was only shot. I didn't know Johnny was dead. He spent the whole day there, talking to police to figure out what happened and trying to communicate the situation to the rest of the family. Our mother was out of town, so I was on the phone with her, trying to show her Johnny's body. One of the officers agreed to let him see his brother's body as they brought him outside. I was drinking a water bottle, and they were bringing his body out. I just threw it aside so I could show Johnny to my mother. One of the cops looked at me and said, "You're going to litter like that?" The cops brought Johnny's body downstairs. The cop who had previously confirmed that his brother could show their mother her son's body ignored him. After murdering their brother, the police continued to disrespect John Zook Jr., his family, and his neighbors. They threatened one of John's siblings and his neighbor with arrest simply for walking around the scene as they grieved their loss. Supposedly, police are trained to de escalate situations, but all the police did in the hours after and before John Zook Jr.'s murder was prove the opposite. John Zook Jr. was tased and shot 6 times. Instead of police de escalating the situation and placing value on a human life, a black life, they killed him. Keep in mind, John Zook Jr. called the police on himself. He said he was having a mental health crisis. This is how they responded. Um, I've said this in many stories that we've reported on in the past, but I just did want to emphasize I myself work in healthcare. I have training on how to help people when they're in the middle of a mental health episode. There is no reason police cannot or should not use that same nonviolent training when they are helping a person in a mental health crisis that me and my colleagues have to exercise when we are in a similar situation. After John's brother's testimony, several more speakers went up, each talking about John and how they loved him. They also talked about how the system prevented John from getting critical health care. Some brought up how Wayne, Michigan opted out of the mental health program, which would allow specialists to go out on calls. Others brought up how this program is misleading anyway, because the mental health program is just part of the police budget and ultimately gives more money to the police. Similar programs exist all over the country, denying or giving insufficient care to people in need of mental health care services and giving more funding to the police to murder with impunity. Tristan Taylor, member of Left Voice and co-founder of Detroit Will Breathe, wrapped up the meeting by discussing next steps and demands. The demands were democratically discussed and voted on and included the following: releasing body cam footage from the murder, releasing the names and records of the individual cops involved, charging and firing those officers, and the formation of a mental health emergency response program that is independently funded and under community control. The group agreed to have another meeting to talk about what comes next. If you want to read that for yourself, that is from Left Voice. Headline: Our activists and community members hold public hearing for the police murder of John Zook Jr. in Michigan. We are going to take another just very brief little break. We come back, have some more to talk about at the national level, as well as some important stories to talk about, sum up here at the state level. Y'all listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org, your only source for political revolution. Everybody, we are back. Everybody, we are back. This is Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. Just gonna do another quick hit here about Michigan, and then probably gonna go into some international news. So I wanted to talk about this next story. This is just I'm just gonna read some excerpts from it, but it's a good story from Bridge, Michigan. Big bucks fuel battle for Michigan House. See top donors to Democrats and GOP. So again, this is just gonna be a quick hit here, but I just want to read a couple of excerpts from this article. Of Republicans' 25 largest donors, 18 are longtime Republican donors and their families. More than a third of the money House Republicans have raised has come from individual contributors giving $10,000 or more. The DeVos family, West Michigan heirs to the Amway fortune, continue to be the largest single source of donations in the battle for the House. Combined, they've given more than $800,000 to Republicans this cycle. Democrats, by contrast, have relied much more heavily on political action committees representing industries or interest groups. Unions, in particular, remain the backbone of Democratic fundraising. PACs representing organized labor have given more than $2.4 million to Democrats this election cycle. The Labor International Union of North America and its local chapter are the most prolific, distributing roughly $473,000 to House campaigns and PACs so far. Though through a PAC, Michigan Realtors have also been the most prolific interest group, contributing 447,238 House committees, including 97 of 110 state House incumbents, Democrats and Republicans alike. So I wanted to just a little analysis from it. I guess there it is. I am a little concerned about the whole realtors group thing. Now I involve myself in a lot of housing organizing, and we have also interviewed a lot of housing organizers over the years. And when realtor in industry groups are heavily fundraising both sides of the political aisle, that is worth raising an eyebrow for those of us out there who are fighting for either like renters' rights or rent control or things of that nature. Um, Especially as we're going into the next session, if Michigan is going to still have that trifecta after the election, it is important to see, how are we going to pressure people in Lansing, particularly the Democrats who have this majority, to try to push housing rights. And if they're getting a lot of money from big interests, that represent realtors or housing or landlords, that could bode poorly for activists who are trying to pressure them to do the right thing when it comes to things like rent control. So something to keep an eye on as we move on through the election and beyond. So I wanted to hop onto this next story, and it ties into there's been a lot of discuss about the recent Venezuelan election, as well as a lot of the anti-immigrant rhetoric that we've been seeing from both Democrats and Republicans. Now, something I kind of want to bring up is, in this election cycle, we've really seen immigrants be thrown under the bus by the Democratic Party in a big way. As recently as last week, Kamala Harris was at a rally posturing about how she will be tougher on immigration than Donald Trump. If you don't have that short of a memory, you may remember back to 4 years ago when those very same Democrats, and I do mean literally the very same ones, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, or sorry, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden were stumping across the country about how terrible Trump's policies on immigration are, like separating families. So he's being brutal against them. And we've seen the Democrats just completely fold in onto itself and just uh, take the right wing propaganda on immigration at face value by trying to match them toe to toe on these brutal and horrendous immigration bills and legislation that again makes it harder for asylum seekers, makes it more difficult for immigrants to seek refuge here in the United States. Again, based on completely false talking points. I'm going to remind my listeners again because it bears repeating. Migrants, on the whole, proportionally commit less crime than native born citizens. And one of the main talking points from both conservatives and Democrats talking about the trafficking of fentanyl across the border, The vast majority of fentanyl is smuggled across the border by U.S. citizens. So, this idea of a migrant or immigrant pride wave is completely made up, and both parties are falling into it and are not calling out the BS for what it is. Much rather, they're perpetuating it. And I think it's important to step back a little bit when we have things like the recent election in Venezuela to talk about our not only the U.S. empire's complicity in those migrant streams, but also how they've had just again a direct hand in creating the migrant crisis in the first place. So there's a great interview with Democracy Now with um, sorry, an interview with Jeff Stein, who recently wrote a piece for the Washington Post, Money War: How Four U.S. Presidents Unleashed Economic Warfare Across the Globe. And uh, particularly, talking about Venezuela, the sanctions that the U.S. has imposed on Venezuela have contributed to an economic contraction roughly 3 times as large as that caused by the Great Depression. The Post also reports, and this is key here, Donald Trump was warned sanctions on Venezuela could result in millions of people migrating from Venezuela. So here's the shell game that is played by these politicians. You have people like Donald Trump, who has hammered on migrants his entire campaign, talking about, oh, descendant criminals from Venezuela, blah, blah, blah. While his administration literally enacted economic policies that drove migration from Venezuela and Honduras and those other countries that he is turning around and scaremongering about on the campaign trail. And of course, Democratic administrations have largely done the same thing. So I'm going to quote at length from Jeff Stein, who was interviewed uh, as part of this story. Starting under the Obama administration, the U.S. began imposing sanctions on Venezuela. At first, they were very limited. They were really just focused on a few members of the Maduro regime. But under Trump, and as was reported in the story, despite the warnings of DHS officials and classified reports about the potential outmigration effects of these sanctions, the Trump administration really choked off the main source of export revenue. 96% of Venezuela's export revenue comes from oil sales. And what the U.S. effectively did over the course of 3 to 4 years was to block these sales from occurring in international markets. And that really strangled joint ventures that were sort of the lifeblood of the Venezuelan economy. This means the sort of oil deals that were worked out with U.S. producers with the Venezuelans that were providing them with the revenue that they needed to buy from imports from other countries. And what happened was a 71% economic contraction in Venezuela, 3 times as great as the U.S. Great Depression and greater than any other peacetime economic collapse recorded in modern history, greater than many other economic collapses of countries at war, including Ukraine after the Russian invasion or Iraq after the U.S. invasion in 2003. This is a cataclysmic event. And economists go back and forth, and it seems pretty clear from the reporting that the economic collapse in Venezuela predates U.S. sanctions. Venezuela had inflation of over 800% before Trump really tightened the screws on the Venezuelan economy, but there is also no doubt that these U.S. measures made the economic situation in Venezuela far worse and did not push out Maduro's government. Obviously, Maduro still remains in power today. Academic attempts to sort of isolate the effects of sanctions and whether they have worked or not are very hard to quantify. Some studies have suggested that the success rate is between 15 and 30%, given that what we have sanctions now in some form on roughly a third of all nations and 60% of all poor countries suggests a very high failure rate. We look in the piece at Cuba, Iran, Zimbabwe, Venezuela, Afghanistan, Syria. These are tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people are being affected in some form by U.S. sanctions, where the regimes that the U.S. are intending to target have not changed hands, have not surrendered their hold on power. And maybe, the U.S. will say that these sanctions are still better than not having any measures, at all because they deprive these regimes of funds at their disposal that they can use for what the US would say are pernicious activities. But at the same time, in terms of actually leading to changes of regime, we don't really see that very much. Many critics would argue, in fact, sanctions actually embolden and empower the people in charge. These regimes in charge because they curb civil society. They reduce the power and the clout of private sector actors that often form a rival power base to a sanctioned authority. And so, in case after case, we see very legitimate, it seems, criticisms of these sanctions regimes. Going back, he talks a little bit about the Iran sanctions, really first imposed in really dramatic effect in 2010 through measures passed by the Obama administration, which amounted to a fascinating expansion of U.S. sanction authority. What we really saw in a very significant way was the first deployment of secondary sanctions, which were to say we're not sanctioning the party that we don't like, but we're also going to say if you engage in trade with the Iranian regime, we will target you also. That effectively represented a major expansion of sanctioning power and really seemed to be, to the advocates of sanctions, to be a very effective approach because in 2015, the Obama administration worked with the Iranian regime on a nuclear deal. That said, under Trump, they pulled out of that deal. Any people who would say that the Iranian sanctions of Obama were successful have to contend with the fact that we abandoned as a country that deal quite quickly and left the Iranians in the lurch, and have since then seen Iranians work with Russia, work with the Cubans, work with other powers that the U.S. is opposed to on forming rival financial networks that leave open the question of whether there's even a possibility of further Iranian sanctions being effective now that they formed all of these rival trading networks that operate as a shadow trade system to what the Western financial system uh, basically is. Anyway, if we're going to read more about that, there's an interview with him at Democracy Now! But the original piece you can find in the Washington Post, Money War, How Four U.S. Presidents Unleashed Economic Warfare Across the Globe. From there, I want to give a couple of updates on international issues. We're going to talk a little bit about Israel and then also close out with what's been going on in the UK. So I want to give this is an article from Truth Out, and I thought this was very pertinent as we're a program based out of Western Michigan University, um, an Institute of Higher Learning, and the toll that Israel's genocidal campaign has had on schools in Gaza. This is an article from Truth Out by Sharon Zhang, published on August 2nd. Israel has damaged or destroyed 85% of schools in Gaza. In just the last 10 months of its genocide, Israel has damaged or destroyed nearly 9 out of 10 schools in Gaza, the United Nations has reported. According to assessments by the UN-backed Global Education Cluster, almost 85% of school buildings in Gaza have been directly hit or damaged, as the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees highlighted on Friday. Some of these schools will need full reconstruction. The war is destroying the present and the future of Palestinian children, the agency wrote, calling for a ceasefire. This is an astonishing proportion of school buildings in Gaza and is emblematic of Israel's campaign to destroy all sense of structure and community for Palestinian children. In addition to blowing off their limbs, orphaning them, and killing them through bombs, bullets, disease, and starvation. School has been suspended throughout the genocide, meaning that Gaza's 1.1 million school children haven't gone to school in nearly a year, severely hampering their development at a time of extreme trauma. The UNRWA announced this week that it is launching a back to learning program this week in Gaza that will raise awareness of unexploded ordnance, among other things. But children's development has been so violently disrupted in the region that this will likely only be a band aid on the crisis. Israel has bombed schools at a higher rate than other buildings in Gaza, suggesting that the Israeli military is deliberately destroying Gaza's school system. A U.S. assessment released this week found that 63% of buildings in Gaza have been damaged, a staggering proportion in itself, but one much smaller than the damage done to schools. In addition to flattening schools, Israeli forces have destroyed every single university in Gaza in what many academics have dubbed a scholasticide. It is a war crime to target civilian infrastructure in war, but as experts point out, Israel has a long history of flagrantly violating international law with impunity. including by targeting educational institutions which play a critical role in preserving Palestinian history, identity, and culture. Many of the attacks on schools in Gaza have also represented attacks on crowded shelters, as thousands of Palestinians have taken shelter in school buildings because of Israel's forced displacement and ethnic cleansing. Just this past week, Israel has launched several attacks on schools. On Thursday, Israeli forces killed at least 15 people and wounded 40 others in an attack on a school that was sheltering dozens of families in Gaza City. And on Saturday, Israeli forces bombed a girls' school in central Gaza that was sheltering 4,000 Palestinians and acted as a field hospital. The attack killed at least 30 people, including at least 15 children, and injured over 100 others. In the wreckage of the attack, the Washington Post reported there appeared to be an unexploded 250-pound bomb made in the United States. That was an article from Truth Out written by Sharon Zhang. Headline: Israel has damaged or destroyed 85% of schools in Gaza. On the topic of the genocide in Gaza, I also wanted to talk about a story. This is from Democracy Now! You may have heard about this story, and I wanted to give a little bit of context to it. Trigger warning: this does deal with some very sensitive topics, sexual assault. But you may have heard about a far right mob in Israel that was attacking an Israeli facility because they were trying to prosecute some Israeli soldiers for sexually assaulting Palestinian prisoners. So here is essentially what happened. In Israel, they were facing accusations that they have been torturing Palestinians held in Israeli prisons. A new report by the UN found at least 53 Palestinian detainees have died in Israeli custody since October 7th. The U.S. also found Palestinian prisoners have faced multiple forms of torture, including waterboarding, sleep deprivation, starvation, electric shocks, and the release of threatening dogs. The UN also reported on Tuesday, a day after a group of far-right Israeli protesters, including members of the Knesset, broke into two Israeli military bases in an effort to prevent Israeli military police from detaining 9 soldiers suspected of torturing Palestinian prisoners. The 9 soldiers are reportedly being investigated for gang raping a Palestinian prisoner at Sde Timan, a facility where prisoners from Gaza say they've been routinely beaten and tortured. In this interview, they interview a couple of local experts, Diana Boutou, a Palestinian human rights attorney, and Oren Ziv, a reporter and photographer for Plus 972 magazine. And I wanted to go down and talk about some of the political analysis of what is going on there in the country and how it relates to um, this incident that just happened at Sde Taman. And this is Oren Ziv from Plus 972 magazine. The protests of Monday started at Sde Taman with members of the government breaking into the place. And later, when they understood the soldiers were transferred to Bayat Lead Army Base to the military court detention center, they moved there. There, members of the government and the Knesset arrived and were inciting against the army. And also there were hundreds of people breaking into the military compound. Not unlike kind of January 6th, when, a lot of the images certainly are evocative of that. The protest, you could see, also were armed men with uniforms and military weapons, probably soldiers, reservist soldiers that are friends or colleagues of the soldiers arrested. And they were protesting against the army with the army uniform and weapons. It's very common for Palestinians and activists in the West Bank when you have soldiers that are actually settlers or a mixture of that. But inside Israel, since the beginning of the war, we haven't seen much of that, of these kinds of militias operating. And they were, of course, also masked. In general, but towards the people who were breaking into the army base, the police were doing absolutely nothing. And as we learned later, the police were just, despite the fact that the army was calling for police, they just didn't show up. I think it's important to see this as kind of a struggle between the old establishment, maybe the center left, or the old people in the army that believe that Israel has to have some legal framework, like to do the crime towards Palestinians, but to keep them proportional and something to investigate, to have some illusion, or to present that Israel is investigating itself. And the other side is people like Ben Gvir and their allies that think that soldiers should have full impunity and also are proud in their crimes and their attacks against Palestinians. And they document it on social media, as we've seen. And this is kind of a clash that is happening in that moment. So again, if you want to read that full article, it's on Democracy Now! Israel's torture and rape of Palestinian prisoners defended by Knesset members and far-right mobs. That was published on August 1st. We're going to take a quick little break. And when we come back, we're going to go from fascist mobs in Israel to some of the fascist mobs in the UK and what has been going on over there. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org, your only source for political revolution. Make sure to check us out online on Facebook or our podcast, Media Cyphers Kalamazoo, that you can find on most podcasting apps. We will be right back.